The religious leaders at the time of Jesus felt that if they said John's baptism came from heaven, they were scared that Jesus may ask them then why they didn't believe him, which means they did not believe John or accepted John. Though it's not clearly mentioned in the Gospels, today's Jesus' conditional question for them is an eye-opener for us, that they resisted John the Baptist, though the multitude accepted John and flocked to him. The leaders resisted John the Baptist and they resisted Jesus as well. When we strive for personal gain rather than looking to the gain of God or gain for God or to the standing for the truth, we can all fail as organization, as civil and political leaders, and even as church leaders, and not exempting each of us in our own situation, in our own families. The moment there is a focus and pursuit on this personal gain, there is going to be evil. The moment our self comes on our way of working and we start seeing our self-gain and self-benefit, we will start working not for God or for good or for the truth, but for ourselves. Our self, our ego can be the worst of enemy of God, the worst of enemy of the world, and can be the worst of enemy of your family and in your relationship as well. Though we start with the leaders today, it has a message for each of us in our own situation. There is no place for goodness around us when we are in the pursuit of self and only our self-goodness. I'm not meaning to say that self or ego or this body is bad, but rather the evil and bad intentions that we go about with. We try to keep God out of this self. We try to keep God out of this body. We forget in ourselves and in all of us there is this presence of God. And the worst can be for those in authority. Those in authority will abuse this power, their authority, in order to protect their position, their status, and work against God and God's will and against the goodness of all the people given under their care. See in the world today, the political situation where the leaders cling on, crave, not for the goodness, but for themselves. We cannot do both. We cannot be egoistic with our evil intentions for the self-benefit, and we cannot be for good and for God and for everybody. Whenever we are there for this ego, for personal selfish motive and selfish gain, in a way we say without words that we just want ourselves. I just want myself and not you, God. Just keep off from me. We want to keep God away and out of our lives. And not just God. Even if we don't believe in God, we just say, I just want to keep the goodness away in my life, in my world, in my family, in our own relationships, in our own families. The moment the self and the selfish gain comes into being, or in our own pursuit, that's going to be the time of destruction. And more so, this can happen to the leaders. At times the leaders may feel that they know everything and they have answers for anything and everything. And I'm speaking of all the leaderships, whether it's the political or civil leader or whether it's church leaders or lay leaders, wherever it may be. They're more in struggle to save their position, their status. They forget that there is a solution in one of the corners of their kingdom. The church leaders forget that there is a solution in one of the pews with one of the simplest person. They don't want to get into embarrassing situation because they said something in the past. They were for something a year back and now God has enlightened them. But no, God, I want to protect my statement. I want to protect my agenda. I want to protect what I have said before. This is the time we are bringing down hell in our own places, in our own situations, in our own kingdoms, in our own leaderships, and in our own families and relationships as well. The hell is when we have the absence of God, because the presence of the self and the presence of ego is too much. Let us ask God to help us stand for the truth and not for our positions, not for our status, not for our selfish gain and for our own will, but the will of God, promoting His truth and promoting the goodness.